All right, guys. My name's Adam Smith. You can find me at codesmith.com. Been here both days. I've enjoyed a lot of talks. I think one of my favorite talks is, I like that SQL one. I really like the React MobX talk. It's really good. I really like Kim's talk. Who had a favorite talk out here? Anybody? You guy right here. You're up front. Favorite talk? One of them.
Dr. Seuss one.
The Dr. Seuss one, yeah. Didn't check that one. Why was it so good?
She has a good way of presenting the information in a non-technical way, even though she's a developer.
Dr. Seuss kind of fits the title then. I like it. What about you? What was your favorite talk?
There was a React Native talk that I liked.
You ever done React Native?
No.
Yeah, me either, but it looks cool. Looks cool. So, a little bit about me. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I've been coding for about 15 years or so. Okay, so I've been coding for about 15 years. Carl's giving me the louder talk here. And started building websites, I think, with AngelFire, and table layouts back in the day. And I was really excited to learn things. And then I moved into the Flash world. It's kind of a mistake. And then I eventually got more into the CSS and then, LAMP stack. And I've been doing a lot more full stack dev, I guess you would say, with, JavaScript stack and LAMP stack. But through my career, I've done a lot of things wrong. But we're just going to talk about the things I've done wrong as a developer. Because if we don't have enough time to talk about the things I've done wrong in my life. It's a long talk. So, we're just going to start out with some inspirational quotes, and it's going to be something like, "Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligent." Henry Ford, right? I mean, I feel like that's something that people would always talk about with failure and inspiration. But the Model T, let's just get real, right? Times have changed. Failure, for us, I would think, be more like this quote. "I've made a huge mistake." By Gob Bluth there. A lot of times you end up looking like this guy. Like, I feel like this is me sometimes when I'm trying to explain something to a client. It's like, hey, just trust me. This is going to work out. And you just kind of make a fool of yourself, and it happens. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about what the expectations are and what the reality is of our life, because we don't nail it all the time. We really don't. We like Kim was saying, in the junior dev world, you think you're ready for it, and then you get hit in the face with the reality of how hard it actually is. And this section I'm liking to call estimating. Or what's really better about this is underestimating, because that's really where most of my development estimating comes in at, just historically. So estimation fails. There's a couple different types of estimation fails. So the first one is probably the most obvious one, right? This is the hours to complete a project. And I put the word complete in italics because completing a project is, in my mind, it's launched, it's live, it's got active users, and we've had a slight cycle back to see if it's actually working. It's not just, oh, I cut up the PSD and I've got it, it's done, it works, it's whatever. It actually has to be seen by the client, it has to be reviewed, it has to go live, and it has to have a couple of weeks of actually living out in the world. And a lot of times we forget to kind of build in that estimation cycle. And it's kind of sad when you give an estimate to your boss or to your project manager, or you write something down and you go, double it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to double it, because that's what I feel like everyone does. Another thing we kind of underestimate is the business makeover. And a lot of times, businesses don't realize how integral your part of the job is to their business. And so you go in, you say, okay, I'm going to fix this thing, or I'm going to build you this thing, and then halfway through, they go, oh yeah, well, we've got these 5 other pieces we didn't tell you about. We've got this special portal that these 3 dudes log into and they export these PDFs and that doesn't work now. So people forget that a lot of times what your job is actually making their business better, and you have to understand how the business works. I feel like that's a fail. I've happened to me quite a few times where you think you've got everything worked out, and then the 10th hour they go, the 12th hour they go, hey, we forgot about this one thing it needs to integrate with. It needs to integrate with Salesforce out of nowhere. You're like, oh, okay, we can do that. Investment in research. We usually just want to dive into it. We want to know. We don't really want to think about how the project's going to work. We just want to go with the tools that we know, that we trust. But we don't want to put in discovery time a lot of times when we're estimating a project. And a lot of times the client doesn't really even understand why you would bill for discovery. So I always try to build in at least a few hours, no matter how big the project is. If it's way bigger, you definitely want to put in some investment research, because it's gonna win in the long run, but it's hard to really justify that to some clients. We're like, you're not getting anything, but you're gonna pay me to go do some research. They don't really like that. But I believe it's a huge value over time, especially for larger projects. Another estimation fail is the neediness and the cluelessness of the client. And the neediness of the client is pretty much a person-to-person. Each person has their own needs, but sometimes we underestimate that they're going to be sending you 10 emails a day, or they're going to be calling you once a week. And you have to kind of budget for that when you're giving estimates or when you're working on different clients. And another one is cluelessness of the client, because some clients don't know anything about the internet. And when you're trying to justify large cost and different scope creeps that might be happening, they don't even know what scope creep is. So you can't just say these words, well, that's scope creep. You have to actually break it all down and explain it. And I think a lot of times we underestimate the cluelessness of some of the clients, and it becomes almost an educational moment. We have to sit down and say, this is how it works, and this is why we're going to do this. And we don't really want to do that a lot. At least I don't. I feel like let me write my code. Super programmer burnout. This is something I've seen, I've experienced, is where you want to be the best programmer. You want to really bring a lot of value to the company, but you just burn out, and you don't see yourself burning out. But when it does happen, you're done. It's like, I can't work anymore. And I feel like we don't really estimate the burnout that well. We don't say, okay, I can do this project, but then I'm going to need a vacation. A lot of people, we just don't think like that. At least I don't. So super programmer burnout's a real thing, and it can make a whole entire project stop, which means it's going to not meet its deadlines. And then your own personal worth. I'm going to show an example, tell a story about this one. Personal worth, that's something you have to evaluate to say, how important is my time off? How important is, being able to get there early? The little things that you need to decide if you're actually going to be happy when you're working. So this was the very first website that I ever built for a client. It's an animated GIF. The whole website was one animated GIF. With image heat maps. So these was image heat maps behind the scenes. It was radial points. And it was amazing. I loved it. I was so happy because this was 2003 maybe. And so, it would come in and there was your content. It wasn't Flash. I wasn't building it in Flash, man. This is way better. But of course, looking at it now, this is a total failure because, you can't read anything. There's no selectable text, there's no SEO, there's no accessibility. It's not responsive. But overall, I estimated $500 to build your whole website. And I got paid $250. So that was a total fail on my part because I didn't really estimate my worth. I didn't estimate how long it was going to take me. And looking back on it, I learned a lot, but it was a total fail. And sometimes it's not just us that fail, but the technology we use fail, and the things that we want to actually be a part of is going to fail. So it should be floating, but clearly it's not. So how do we fail with technology? A lot of times we don't understand how it works. We just don't want to take the time to read the docs. Sometimes the docs can be 40 pages long, and we're just like, I'll read the intro and just start going at it. And then you get to a point where you're running up against a wall and you're inserting HTML dangerously with React, And it's like, whoa, I shouldn't be doing that. Anyone doesn't know there's actually a function called like insert dangerously, which is amazing. And I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. I should read the manual. Another thing we do is we don't understand why a technology exists. A good one was React. When it first came out, and people were like, why do you need that? You just use jQuery. And I've built a single-page application with jQuery, and it was a huge mistake, and I never will do it again. It was horrible. But then as soon as I saw something like React or Ember or Angular, it's like, wow, that makes perfect sense now. But a lot of times we don't realize why a technology even exists, and we don't see the need for it because we haven't been presented with that challenge. Relying too much on one technology, like early 2000s, me and Flash, and I built so many websites in Flash, and all that skill set, I mean, I guess some of it's still around, but most of it is just out the window. You know, you have to actually allow Flash to run now in your browser. It doesn't even run by default. So we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. You know, you don't want to build everything with the same technology if it's not needed. It's really good to diversify. I know we want to be experts at things, but you need to have some different understanding of how things work and not just, I only know this one thing. A shiny new toy. That's one that I've done. Mostly I did it more before I was a contractor, when I was more at a salary job that wasn't really tech heavy, because I was bored and I just wanted to jump on the shiny new thing. And it eventually would cost the company money because it took me longer to get up to production level. And a lot of times it was bleeding edge, and so I was constantly having to update, which would then break and would cost more time. So a shiny new toy is really fun when you're off work, but sometimes you might not want to choose the shiny new toy when you really need to get something done. And then, of course, relying too much on StackOverflow.com. I still do that. Every day I probably look at StackOverflow.com. But it's scary especially when like Vagrant's not working or there's some other terminal thing's not working, and I'll just copy this terminal command that someone pasted, and I'll just paste it in my terminal, and then all of a sudden my my Ruby version's been deleted. It's just, you don't know, it's happened. So don't just copy and paste from Stack Overflow. I'm talking to myself. Don't copy and paste from Stack Overflow. And now we're going on to another two-parter, which I call communication. And this is the face that sometimes people make at me when I try to communicate to them. So the first part is communicating with coworkers. So communication fails. So if we look up here, this is an example of a communication fail. We're going to return it doesn't matter, who knows what it's going to be, but it's going to return something. So the no readme file, this was one I was very guilty of in my early development career. I remember when someone said, where's the readme file, bro? And I was like, readme file? And then I realized I've been really messing up. For those that don't know, it's just a simple text document that sits at the root, usually, of a project. A lot of times it's Markdown, and it basically explains the bare bones of what the project is, technology stack, maybe when it was started, and the contributors, and how you can, if it's an open source project, how you can be a part of it. And this is what GitHub will read on the default page. So that's how the readsme work, and they're really important. Another one is no comments in complex code. I've heard some people say things like, oh, if the code's good enough, you don't have to comment. I'm like, no, that's dumb, because a lot of times you have to write crappy code because there is some type of other constraint of business logic that sits on top of it that that doesn't make sense. Like, why am I doing this in the code? Well, it's because, Sherry wanted this special function that I don't really like, and it needs to be well documented, all right? Even if it's even if you think you're the best programmer, you need to write code comments. The programmer syndrome. This is one that I've experienced in companies, and it's kind of something that Kim was talking about, like not having that mentoring, not having that open environment. Everyone's got to, do the most, the most push-ups in code that they can. And we have to be the smartest and the strongest. We just don't admit that we've ever made a failure. And I feel like that's something that that holds people back, and it holds back the community. And sometimes I can get into, like when I was younger, I was definitely more of a programmer, but you get old, get wise, I guess. Only email or chat, never meet in person or video chat. And this one is kind of important. I work with some people international, and there might be a language barrier, and we don't actually speak the same language, but at least to say, like, I'm looking you in the eye and like a friendly wave and a friendly smile. Like, it really breaks things down So when you're communicating with someone, you just realize it's a person on the other end. You forget, like, when just as email and chat, you can kind of lose that humanity. So I think, just like this other point, it's forgetting we're people. And I think that is a really important part, especially with code all day, when you're just constantly surrounded by logic and there's no humanity in it. But I mean, I love programming, but you forget that it's just the person at the other end that's actually going to be using this software. And then the fun part, communicating with clients. Okay, so communication fails with clients. I haven't heard from you in weeks. Are you still able to deliver my site by tomorrow? As their emails, I swear I've seen before. Overcomplicated jargon. A lot of times, we don't want to take the time to communicate with the client. We don't want to break down these issues and explain it. And, we have a game that we play at this meetup called Meet the Geeks. It happens once a month, and it's just the acronym game where we just name acronyms and see who can say what it means. Like start off easy with HTML, then you go into more like SCSS, and you get more complicated. And it's just making fun of how much jargon there actually is in the industry. Not taking the time to explain the solution or over-explaining. So usually when I need to explain the solution, it's when the client is questioning, or the client's questioning why they need this extra expense, and they're kind of upset. That's when you need to take the time to kind of break it down and explain it. But if something's broken, like, hey, my site's not working, maybe then you don't have to have a 30-minute conversations about HTTP protocol. Maybe you just say, okay, I'll get it fixed. So you got to understand when you need to explain, and other times when you just need to shut up and get the work done. And that's an interesting balance. I think it comes from each individual client that you work with. Ignoring emails. I mean, that's something that I'm sometimes still guilty of. But I'll get back to him. I'll get back to him. And then like 2 weeks later, you're like, oh yeah, I should have emailed that person. And then they just send you like sad emojis, and you don't like, okay. So what I try to get better at it, and I try to be, even if I don't have the time, I'll still reply with 1 word, 2 words. Hey, I'm in a meeting, or I'm busy this week, and can I get back to you next week? And though I don't actually deliver what they need when they feel like they really need it, at least there's that open stream of communication, which makes them usually feel a lot better. No contract or explicit scope. This is definitely a big fail for me early on in my career. A lot of times, clients, it goes back to that business makeover. They don't even realize there needs to be a scope or need to be a contract. Some clients, and you actually have to write everything down and sit them down and say, is this what you want? And you have to force them to do a little bit of work, which they actually don't want to do. They just want you to do all the work. And it's really important to have an explicit scope, because if they don't understand what the scope is, then you're going to be getting an email or a phone call saying, well, when I clicked this button, I thought it was going to open up this window, and then it was going to email Bobby automatically. And I'm like, I didn't know you wanted that, because it was never written down. Like, oh yeah, we talked about it in that meeting one time. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. So you really need to have a contract and an explicit scope of what you do. Phased delivery and baby steps. Don't build this giant machine and just chuck it over the wall, right? The client's going to be like, I got your project done, bye. No, you really need to have baby steps, which is huge. I like to maybe do like a small, simple project if I'm going to be working with a big company, because I want to make sure we fit as a culture and we actually communicate well. And then you have a phased delivery. So on this part I'm going to deliver maybe the wireframes, and you're going to pay me a little money. And this part, I'm going to deliver a working prototype, and you're going to pay me a little money. And this time, I'm going to deliver you a final project, and you're going to pay me the rest of the money. And that way, you have that cycle of I'm doing work, I'm getting paid, you're getting validated that my work is good, and that we're going to be in this together. And being afraid to say I don't know to the client, because you're supposed to be the expert. It's really important just to sometimes go, I have no idea, I'll have to look into it, I'll need to get back to you, because they might not want to hear it, but I think being honest with them is going to have them be respectful of you more, because then they trust you when you do say you know something. But if you say, I'm infallible, I never make mistakes, you're going to make a mistake, and then you're going to seem like a liar. And at the end of the day, just like with the coworkers, just forgetting they're people. How was your weekend? Did you have a good time? As programmers, I forget too. Like, I'm just so into the code, I don't want to take time to think about anyone else's life. I just want to get the project done and working really well. So I think it's important that we take a moment and realize, everyone's a person, and they all have their own they have their own agendas. So failing forward doesn't always work out. This is the truth. We want to pretend like failing is going to be this great thing, but no. Sometimes you just end up on your ass looking dumb. Sometimes mistakes can be amazing, right? But like I said, most of the time we just end up looking dumb because, like this guy, total dummy. There's no pot of gold. There's no happy endings. Sometimes we just fail, and that's all right. But what's really important, guys, is just because you fail, it doesn't. Just because you fail doesn't mean you've learned. And this is a big one. You're not going to have instant gratification. I know we have instant gratification in our life. We get our emails, we get our Slack messages, we get the TV turned on. Sometimes it takes years to realize that that was a big mistake and I shouldn't have done it. So don't beat yourself up. Take it on the chin, dust off, and try and keep going. Sometimes, I already said that. All right. Everyone has something special to offer the world. Mr. Rogers, I love that guy. And then, yes, you're failing, but you're not the only one. Everyone in this room has failed at something, especially with web development. But what's really important is that we all fail together. So that's it, guys.